All right, let's get started. Welcome. This is Barzilai. This is on the drive, the content folder for today.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, yeah.
So we're going to move into a newer topic. And again, we're just building, right? We're building from where we started to everything was in the time domain. This is last semester. We focused last semester. And then we started doing differential equations. And we saw how unpleasant those things can be to solve. So then we developed Laplace, and we love working with Laplace in terms of solving these differential equations, except the difficult part is that we have to do a lot of algebra to go and get our time domain based results. And so what we talked about this semester is let's move more and more so that we can get the Laplace domain results and stay in the Laplace domain to give us input or information about the time domain. So we're going to extend that today, and we're actually going to extend it to the concept of we take our system models, some of the stuff we did with definitely the stuff we did with electrical systems, and some of the stuff that we did with mechanical systems. And again, that's just like a thimbleful of what you can do for system modeling. There's a lot of chemical processes that you can do. There's probably civil, like there's some dynamic, although that's motion. There's just tremendous amounts of things that you can model from as long as you can linearize it and you can make it time invariant, you can use these systems. So you really can model just about any system except for the linearity part, right? That's the real world is almost always not, it's almost never linear. So we have to simplify and make it work for us. But as long as you have that background and you're limiting your range, you can model almost any physical system. So now we have all these blocks of this and that and all these different things happening. And we'd like to integrate that so that we have an overall system response. Because what we're going to do is if we input a voltage or it could be a force, whatever it is, into a system, and we want to see how the system responds, is it going to be stable? Is it going to be, have that percent overshoot stuff less than a certain value? There's a bunch of different things that we talked about. Wait a minute, let me just make sure. I completely covered. I finished up the last presentation, hoping I did. We finished all the second order system stuff. So I just want to make sure. Before we get too crazy, anybody have any questions on the second order system stuff? I've got to put a homework up. And so the question is, I forgot to ask this at the beginning. The question is, should I put the homework up and do it now? Because you'll have a test a week from tomorrow, or should I wait until after the test has been administered? Pat?
The homework and I'll have to let over topics and tests.
The only thing that's going to be on the test, or might be on the test, is full zero maps.
Wow.
So like basic, what's that? Normally I would give you a week. So it'd be due or the day before.
Yeah.
You want to do? Because the only other option would be you could have it do the Thursday after the exam, or we could even have it do the following Tuesday. So my question is, first question is, do you want to make the homework assignment available now? Or will that cause consternation that you feel like you have to work on it and not focus on studying for the test? So that's the question. If I make it available, is that going to force people to study? I mean, it's building on material, but it's not really relevant to what we're talking about.
Maybe a little bit.
All right. So I'd hold off on it. So Barzilai, I can send it to you if you want.
Yeah.
If you want to work on it, that's fine. And then if other people want to work on it, just let me know. But I'll upload it, but I won't make it viewable until whenever. That way, make it easier. And then probably a due date, it'll be 2 weeks from today. So it'll give you a chance to study for the test and then catch your breath from the test and go from there. So that being said, any questions on this material? Because we did introduce some new topics, right? We did introduce, we talked a little bit about finite poles and zeros. But when we got first order systems, we had our time constant, and then we developed a bunch of equations. Time constant, rise time, and settling time for forced order systems. Those are just simple equations. And then we moved into second order systems, which we developed critical damping, underdamped systems, overdamped systems, and also undamped systems, which allowed us to introduce this concept zeta, which is our damping ratio. And then our natural undamped frequency, omega sub n. And then we also had omega sub d, which is down here at this end. And so we can now start to get these equations. Let's get to it. Where we had rise time, settling time, peak time, and percent overshoot, which are really useful equations for us to design systems. And we saw how we monkeyed with those, we would get different results. But literally, it's just a lot of plugging and chugging. The hardest equation you're going to have to do is the percent overshoot here, because remember, this is the only equation that has zeta in it. And who can solve? Take that out of the way. Where is my? See the snipping tool. Somehow it closes on me. It's there. Why don't you come up? There it is. So who's good at math? Oh, it didn't do it. My snipping tool is not snipping. Okay.
Can you remove one?
What's that?
Here.
I closed it and let's restart it. Maybe that's why it wasn't coming out. Okay. And Drew, you were right. Did you see the little instruction that tells you how to do a snip? So this equation here, you have to solve that for zeta. And you do that.
And
We'll do it really quickly. We're solving for zeta. Oh,
what's this?
why is it asking me to do this? Shouldn't need to sign in. What's that? But their Microsoft password is different than
Oh, no, I can find it. Yeah, I don't. You feel about that. Yeah. In your 6 months. Yeah.
okay, so how would you solve this equation for zeta? Well, the first thing you do is you get rid of the percent, right? By dividing by both sides by 100. So now what you need to do is take the ln of the overshoot, and that's equal to minus zeta pi, right? Yes, no? We'll move the denominator over to here. Okay. Now, we've got to get rid of, well, let's just do this. Good so far? Now we have to square both sides. And it's important when you square both sides, you keep the negative term in here, because what happens when your overshoot is less than 1, which it should be? What is the ln of a number less than 1? Hmm?
0. 1 is 0. Oh, minus is negative.
It's a negative number. Very good. So the only way to get a natural log to be less than 1 is it has to be a negative number. So I'm going to square both sides. And notice I'm keeping the negative in there, because you're going to have a negative in the denominator, and that'll cancel out those terms. Okay. So that is squared. Now I have this term. So now I have 1 equals anybody see what I did there? I just pulled out the y squared or the zeta squared so that it's on its own. And I'm still keeping the negative term in there because I've got to counteract that negative ln term. So now I can factor. So minus pi and then zeta. Not too bad, right? So I'm going to highlight this by putting an arrow to it. Most of you will forget when you do the squaring and all that stuff, you're going to drop the negative term and you're going to wonder why you're going to get goofy zeta numbers. Things aren't going to drop out. So be very careful. You've got to cancel out that negative sign that you get from the natural log with a negative sign in the numerator. When you do that, it should be good to go. No problems there. What's that? Yep, if you do square it, it also should go away as well, but sometimes people don't, and they'll see the negative number and then they factor it out, so it cancels. Just need to remember that. That's the hardest equation. Otherwise, not all the other equations are pretty simple. Okay? Yeah, so most design problems are going to be based on your percent overshoot needs to be 50% or less, and your settling time needs to be something. And if you remember from this equation here, you'll notice my settling time has zeta and mega sub n. Yeah, but you don't, so that's right, that's the general equation. But what you're trying to do is you're trying to find a characteristic equation that looks like this. So what I'm going to tell you to do is design a system here that has percent overshoot less than 30% and a settling time less than 10 seconds. So you're going to have to design a system that would meet that. And then it might be that B and A, so A and B could be a bunch of resistors, inductors, and capacitors. And so I might say, here's an RLC circuit, design an RLC circuit that meets these criteria. And then I might say, you have a resistor size of 1K ohm. You need to find the L and the C or ranges of L and C that'll meet those criteria. You want to do that for homework? Right now? I don't know. Do you want to do a homework problem now, or do you want to wait and see what the regular homework is? Because a regular homework problem for us electrical engineers is design a circuit that has less than 50% overshoot and has a settling time within 10 seconds. That would be a reasonable problem. Right? That would be for step input. We know it has to be for step input because a step input, it's going to have a steady state value that finalizes to a nominal value. We can't do it for AC input because you have a transient response, and then you have that continuous cosine or sine wave output. So this would be a type of design problem that electrical engineers would do. But you could certainly do something with masses and torque. Remember our free body diagram? We had dampers, we had springs, and we had the mass. You could certainly have a problem where it's like, you need to go ahead and tell me the lever length or what the spring constant needs to be to meet those criteria. So that's where you're taking your design to the next level. Okay. So I won't necessarily assign this, but this is how you do some of the design stuff. Any other questions on second order systems stuff? Because this is when we start doing way more design.
Gonna be problems with just need to get into that format. There's only n squared over s squared.
It would probably be more like Ryan said, s squared plus as plus b form. That would be a more interesting one. But I could say find, find percent overshoot or all that stuff. I can give you a sneak peek of the homework. You'll just have to know, think about it. So here's homework number 4. So let's see. Now I might skip this problem because this is a mechanical system problem. Actually, why don't we sign this problem? This one is an easy one because you have enough time to do it for the test. This is just that last bit when we looked at the mechanical system modeling. This is an easy one. So I'll put this one up there. You just have to go ahead and do the transfer function. Any idea where to do the transfer function? No? How about go to the end of this? You have the transfer function right here. Right? This is the exact problem, the servo motor. Some of the terms are different, but you can get the transfer function for this homework directly from here. And then just do the steady state no load motor speed for a 24-volt step input. How do you get this? Yeah. Thank you, Garrett. I was going to start harassing you all. It's final value theorem. Anytime you see steady state, you should immediately start thinking final value theorem. You've got a 24-volt step input. That's your input. You have a transfer function that you're going to get from over here. You should be able to do and get the final value theorem. You also, because you're all getting pros at Simulink, you could also simulate that in Simulink. So if you wanted to do that in Simulink to check the final value theorem, you may want to try that as well. You can build the block diagram here, but keep in mind, what's the output that you're doing? The homework problem is asking you for what is the steady state no load speed. So I'm going to pull the output from here, right? No? Yes? If you wanted to build it in Simulink, where would you pull the output?
Before the
Why right here?
that's
Yeah, this is speed, isn't it? This is omega sub s. The first derivative of position is velocity, angular velocity speed. And the problem, if you look for it, says steady state, no load speed. I don't really care about position. What's the steady state position going to be for a motor that's been driven by 24 volts? Infinity. Just keeps rotating, doesn't it? So it never gets to steady state. It just keeps going up. So it's very specific. You have to ask this question for speed and not position, because it's always going to rotate. So yeah, so all you need to do basically is cut this off. You can include it if you want. If you include it, make sure if you do your Simulink, this is you run to your output scope or your output data point. That's the point you actually pick off. You don't actually need the 1/s. It's up to you if you want to include it, that's fine. So we'll put that one on there because that's pretty simple, quick one. But homework number 5, get back to it. Pole zero map, easy one. Find C, rise time and settling time for a second order. And what do you know? Problem number 3. Exactly what we said, right? Find the second order system transfer function. What does that mean? I want S squared plus AS plus B that meets these criteria. Pardon? You don't know what your question was? Can I think what your question might be and tell me if I'm wrong? I think your question is, all right, how would you solve that problem? Well, what I would do so I've got 2 criteria. I've got a overshoot criteria, and I have a settling time criteria in the problem description, correct? Let's go back and look. Pardon?
Overshoot, the way you solve OS, percent OS, thing that, yes.
TS is the settling time, OS is the overshoot. So over here, I see a 15% overshoot and a settling time of 2 seconds. All right, great. So if I use my settling time equation, can I get my answer from there? Why not? Pardon? 1 equation, 2 unknowns, right? If I look at my percent overshoot equation, how many equations? And how many unknowns? 1 equation, 1 unknown. So you're better off to solve percent overshoot equation, which you're welcome. Although it's just algebra, right? I mean, it looks like a lot, and everybody said it first. I don't think it could solve for it, but again, this is not trying to make you guys feel better, but was it really that difficult once you started just grinding through? Not too bad. Although it's all relative. So I was helping my son with one of the homework problems, and he had a crossword puzzle, and it was 3. And this was blank. So I'm like, oh, this is great. This is algebra. So 3, and my son's name is Louis. Let's call it a variable that we have to solve for. And I said, now you're going to divide. You got to do the same thing on one side to the other side. So you divide both sides by 3. So when you divide 12 by 3, what do you get? Hey, there's your answer. It's like, what are you doing? But he's in 3rd grade, so it's a little bit different.
What do you think of the new man?
The new math?
Yeah.
I didn't realize there's new math. I thought there was only math.
Add some like making division like take 10 extra steps.
Yeah, so they're using all these boards and stuff like that. Like he has a multiplication board that I guess it goes up to 10 by 10. And so if you just use rows and columns and you multiply it out. So here's my opinion about life in general, right? History is important, geography, social studies, we all have to have a general understanding. But somebody would say, hey, can you do Jeopardy? No, I can't remember movie titles and all that stuff. I have in my pocket, not in my pocket now, but I have a computer that tells me all that stuff. So my life, what I want to fill my brain up with is much more important, useful information. I don't need to necessarily know, like it'd be good to know where Barzillai is from, so we can have a nice conversation about, hey, tell me about your country and all that stuff. And so you have a general background. But if you said specifically where on a map is my country located, I couldn't do that. And I would be frank and just say, it's not a sign of disrespect. It's just the fact that I don't need that on a day-to-day basis. But if you ask me, hey, can you show me where my country is? Well, sure, let's bring up a map and I'll type it in and bring it up from there. What's much more relevant to me is how do I, I don't know, like take care of myself, and what's good if I have an owie in my elbow or something like that. So filling up your brain with that, or what kind of activities I need to do. One of the other things, this is really starting to get more important for everybody in this room, is, you're gonna laugh, but almost everybody's gonna start making a lot of money here pretty soon, right? What's the best way you can hold on to your money? Investment and taxes. So you should learn about investing and you should learn about taxes. Not to cheat on taxes, to pay the minimum tax that you're required to do so. And I know so many college kids, smart guys like all of you and folks on internet land that will go to H&R Block, whatever, and pay $200 to fill out the 1040 easy form, which should take you 10 minutes to do by hand. Or you can actually go free file on the IRS Gov and you can do it for free. And so one of the things that, especially now as tax season's kicked off in earnest, is you should do your own taxes, especially as your engineering students. It's a pain to get through that first time, but what it does is it makes you more knowledgeable moving forward. And like an IRA, why that's such a good investment. Because if you do an IRA now, you pay no tax on it now, so you save that income. If you do a Roth IRA, you pay tax on it now, but you don't pay taxes on it when you take it out the money. Which is a better investment, the IRA or the Roth IRA? Pay tax now? Why is that? It'll go tax-free. So if you put in $10,000 now and you let it sit there for 20 years, it might be worth $250,000. Would you rather pay taxes on $7,000, $10,000 or $250,000? Just a heads up. The other thing too is once you get your life gets more complicated, like for our kids, we've tried to encourage them to invest. And sorry for getting up on a side topic, but we tried to encourage them to invest at a young age. So we've given them money and we have a custodial account set up for them. And one of the things is called the kiddie tax. That's what it's called. So the kid, if they make more than $1,300 in unearned income or passive income, they have to pay taxes on it. And the parents have to pay tax on it. Crazy, right? So what do? You sell the stocks before they get to 1,300, and then you buy them back the next day. Because what you've done is they've gotten a capital gains up to $1,300. That's passive income, but it's perfectly legal. It's perfectly within the tax code. So then you buy back the next day, and then the idea is that you can do another 1,300 next year, and then another 1,300 the year after that. So what you're doing is you're following the rules, but by just being aware of some of these things, you don't have to pay as much taxes. So they don't have to pay as much. Same thing with IRA versus a Roth IRA. And the other thing too, because most people in this room is going to be making a lot of money pretty soon, you can't even contribute to a Roth IRA. You make too much money. You can put $7,000 in an individual retirement account as long as you have earned income of $7,000. But if you make more than, I can't remember what the amount is for singles, you can't put money into a Roth IRA directly. So this is the interesting part. This is the learning about taxes. What you can do, there are no income limits to put money in a traditional IRA, which is that other one that we talked about. the tax at the end. But here's the thing, you can convert traditional IRA to a regular IRA, a Roth IRA, as much as you want. So the IRS in their infinite, or maybe Congress says, no, you can't contribute to or directly to a Roth IRA. Okay, so now I have to contribute to a regular IRA and then transfer it over to a Roth IRA, which is the same thing. What? And there's no income limits, there's nothing like that. So why make me do that extra step? But that's just what you have to do. So that's one of those things where you think you can't take it, it's not taking advantage, it's just using what the system is. And that's just one of those things. So I guess it's relevant conversation now, and I'm not sure, because I'm not sure if you have to pay income taxes in the United States. You probably do, but I'm not sure. But the idea is that's the way that you have to do it. And then you'll start learning, because probably within 5 years, you know, most of you all will probably be making enough money. You cap out on Social Security. I think it's like $160,000 this year. So if you make more than $160,000 in earned income, you don't pay any more Social Security. You still pay taxes on it, but your Social Security is done. But the thing is that, but if the company, so if you work for one company, but if you're like Garrett, who had 7 jobs, each company doesn't know that you've made above $160,000. So each company will continue to take Social Security out. And if Garrett's not on his game, the IRS just keeps that Social Security. So that's excess Social Security that they put as a credit for your account. So it's just like you put in more money on your W-2s. If you want to, absolutely. I think you'd be making more than that. Most of you start out making in the mid to high 80s to start. You work on your PE and you work hard for those next 4 or 5 years. You'll learn a lot. If you do road work, you're on the road a little bit, you can make a ton of money. If you see the value of a company, I mean, there's just a lot of transfers and stuff like that. I mean, I know a lot of people in industry who make over 160. There's a company that I do this conference with. They, you know, one of my good friends went to grad school and he laughs at me because he knows my salary. He can look on the internet. You all can look at my salary and see what I got paid last year. It's all public knowledge. So anybody who worked at the university, you can type their name in and say, what's their salary for last year or 2 years ago, whatever there is. So he knows exactly what it is. He says, I wouldn't even get out of bed for what you make. He makes more than double what I make, but it's like, you know what? I do it not just to make money. I do it for other reasons. But that's me, you know, that was important to me. But if you want to hustle, especially when you're younger, you can certainly make $200,000 a year. I know a lot of people who do it. And you just have to work hard. You got to work hard at first. And then the other thing too is you have to invest wisely. But you can only do so much for retirement. So then you got to do things outside of retirement. So what other income streams can you generate? You know, do you want to be a landlord? Do you want to buy just stocks and day trade, or do you want to let long-term stuff? You can do property. I have a property. Look at all the gray hair I have. So, but I only did that. I did it for pure reasons. So my mother-in-law, we bought a house that was really close to ours so that my mother-in-law could live there, and it was a 2-unit. So she'd have one, and then the other one would help cover some of the expenses because she, you know, had limited resources. And we bought the place. It was right, you know, when COVID was really in earnest. And she's like, oh, I really don't want to move there. So she never moved in, and she passed away a couple of years ago. So now we have this 2-unit that we have great tenants, and, you know, you have to develop a relationship for them, but it's a headache. It's a pain. There's always something you need, but always something they need. And they might be respectful of your stuff, but the concept is that they're never going to respect it the way you would. And if there's leaks and stuff like that, you know, it's maybe a burden or a hassle, but for you, hey, if there's water leaking, I want to know, because the whole floor could rot out, you know, tell me. So you have to be, it's not passive where you can just sit on your house and count money, or sit on your couch and count money. You've got to be active. So, but it can be lucrative. I mean, my wife and I have done okay, but we're pretty fortunate that we're handy enough that we can do most of the stuff ourselves. And we have 2 little kids. We're trying to teach them to work. So we showed them how to shovel. So we have our driveway that's there, and we go over there and we shovel it. And, you know, we give the kids a few bucks just for helping and all that stuff, but just trying to teach them those opportunities. But yeah, easy peasy. That should be your first house, actually. Is don't buy a single family home, buy a multifamily. Most of you all will, what's that? duplex, triplex, whatever you want. I mean, the more units you can swing, the better. The biggest thing that's gonna prevent you from getting ahead in 5 years. Take your finger and point to yourself. For not getting ahead. What's gonna be your biggest problem? What's that? Point it to yourself. You're gonna be the biggest impediment. How many people are gonna graduate and say, I worked hard, I deserve a new car. I deserve a nice vacation. I wanna go eat fancy food. I wanna. And before you know it, well behind. You know how much the average car payment is? Car payments per month, 700 bucks a month. Who here is gonna have student loans when they graduate? You don't have to tell me, you can keep it private, but a few of you will, and that's gonna be $1,000. You're not gonna have that much disposable income. So that's another good thing. So if you're talking about the federal government has been passing on loans.
Actually, Maine gives you a nice rebate.
If you stay in the state of Maine, but why would you limit yourself? You should, and it's only like $4,000 a year, something like that. No. Nope. I would go wherever you want. You can apply for a PE in the state of Maine and not be in the state of Maine. You don't have to be in the state of Maine. You can just say, I want a PE in Maine. I have a, well, it's inactive, but I have PEs in Virginia, New York, Texas, New Hampshire. And I've never lived in Texas and never lived in New Hampshire. You just apply for it through reciprocity. So if I can give one last final piece of advice in the class that has nothing to do about control systems, but the worst thing you can do when you get out is within the first year, go buy yourself a new car. That's the worst thing you can do.
It's so interesting. It's the opposite of what they do. The first thing you do as an engineer, you buy a BMW 4.5 or an M5.
I'm not saying.
And the car back to school, you show everyone.
So, and that's okay, but who really owns the M5 or M3? The bank does. You don't own it. You're just making the payments. And the worst thing is lease, because the lease is you're preparing to borrow a car. What do you owe after the lease is over? No, you don't own a car. A lease is you're renting a car. You don't actually own it. You have to give the car back. Renting an apartment because you have to have a place to live. So, you know, the suggestion about renting an apartment is if you're going to be new to an area, new to a job, and you're not sure if you're going to stay there long term, okay, maybe you rent for a year and then get a gauge of if you want to, you know, stay in that area long term. That also gives you an opportunity to look at the neighborhoods, but then you can also hopefully start saving up some money for a down payment on a house or multifamily. I don't think it truly ever crash, not in Maine anyway, because there isn't housing booms like you would get in the Midwest. I mean, in Arizona, a friend of mine got into trouble where I don't know if it was even legal or not, but he was doing these purchase and sale agreements. He'd buy a place, him and his wife, so they had good credit. So they'd buy a place and then somebody would pay them, we'll pay you $10,000 if you buy the place, get the loan in your name, and then we'll pay you a monthly rent. Well, they did that for I don't know how many houses, and then all of a sudden the market crashed. And so now these people that were renting are like, I don't want to buy this house because you paid $300,000 for it, but it's only worth 150. So they walked away after the term ends. And so my friend just ended up filing bankruptcy because he owed way too much money for a crash. But that's because they were building, you know, 10,000 units a month. In Maine, it's not, it'll go down for sure, but it doesn't have the swings that you find. But the car thing is probably the worst investment you'll ever make. It's the biggest depreciable asset everybody buys and doesn't bat an eye. I'm not saying don't get nice cars, but maybe get a 3-year-old nice car that's in good shape. Maybe it doesn't have the latest tech, but have you driven a brand new car lately? It's annoying. You get beeps and bells and whistles because it gives you lane warnings and all this active or. No, it's not that. If you're getting too close to a car, it'll give you beep, beep, beep. There's a car behind you, beep, beep, beep. If you go over in the lane, it beep, beep, beeps because you're trying to pass. I mean, things that you would normally do. That's the part that, you know, the newer cars, because they're trying to sell you, not necessarily on on a better car, they're trying to sell you on more amenities. So if you look at the technology from a year or two ago, they're putting more stuff in the technology, bigger screens and stuff like that, just to entice you to buy the newest model. And the other thing is, and this is a trick, which is they upcharge you. Oh, you really need to get the Platinum Plus 257 model because you can't get that big screen unless you get this extra $10,000 version. And it's like the screen goes from this to this. Is it that much of a difference? Yeah, but that's what they use as a selling point. But again, every car you buy in 10 years, it'll be basically worthless. So if you drop $50,000, it's literally like taking $50,000 and waving goodbye to it, because in 10 years, it won't be worth anything. If you bought a $20,000 car, you still have to have a car, so you get $20,000, but the difference, that $30,000, you can take that money over time and invest it, and then you can actually have money so that you can do some investments and things like that. That's I would be highly skeptical of that. A Tacoma that's 20 years old. I mean, I know for a while there were cars that were, getting a slight appreciation, but that's like first time historically that's ever happened. So I wouldn't bet on that being the case. And it would be under like extreme, like you drove it 2 miles a year or something like that, and you always garaged it, and you had all these different things. It's probably not viable. So I practice what I preach. And again, I'm not saying I'm better than anybody else, but I'm not a car person either. But I have a 2010 with 170,000 miles and a 2012 with 102,000 miles. Those are my two cars. What's that? A Prius and a Benza. That's our family car. And it's like, I pay the minimum that you have to for registration. The other thing too is you buy that $50,000 M5. I know that's a little light. You got to pay sales tax in Maine, and it's 5.5%. And then in Maine, you also have to pay what's called excise tax. So every year they tax you on the value of the car. And after 4 years in Maine, it goes down to like, I don't know, it's 4% of whatever the MSRP is. But you have to pay, 4% of a higher MSRP. But that first year, you have to pay like an extra $5,000 in sales tax and excise tax. So that $50,000 car, you got to tack on another $5,000 instead of the $20,000 car. The excise tax is way less because its MSRP is likely lower, and it's also 3 years into it, and you have sales tax on 20K versus 50K. So, items to think about.
How do you go? Much about actually.
Look at my hair. I'm old.
But then did you learn because of tax classes?
Nope. How I learned? I learned, this is the first few years I did this. I printed all the forms out on irs.gov. So when you go to forms, I literally sat down with PDF and I read this 100, but you only need to read like the relevant pages. You actually have to read a lot more though, and some because they actually tell you to read this form and this schedule and all that stuff. But you literally just start reading this. So the first couple of years, I read it, with a lot of detail, and I would go to the stuff. It's all on all IRS.gov, and you can download these forms for free, and you just fill them out and you print them out. So I did this for years. I probably did this for 15 or 20 years. The last time I had anybody do my taxes was 1996. So I've been doing my taxes for 30 years. I just recently, because I went to this program here, so I don't even use H&R Block. I use some problem called Tax Slayer. And I think this is I think you can get it done for $23. And they do all the calculations for you. But there's not a lot of details and instructions here. So this just makes it easier for me so I don't have to do all those calculations in Excel or in my calculator, because I was making mistakes. And if I had to update things, I had to go and update everything all over here. It was getting to be more cumbersome, especially as your tax situation gets more complex. So $23, which is, if you look at TurboTax.
Yeah, they really try to upsell you on TurboTax. I don't know how many times I have to say, no, thank you. No, thank you. It's supposed to be free, but they don't have to pay.
I I can't even tell you how much TurboTax costs. You see how smart they are? I don't know who US, but it's, I thought it was like 40 to. Like if you go to, let's go to Walmart.
There's actually a Walmart register service.
You can buy it here. So here's what TurboTax costs. So $50. I don't know what TurboTax Deluxe is. So you can pay $50 for it. You probably would do it online.
That's just for federal.
That's just for federal. So here's the thing. So TaxSlayer, and I should have kept this up. But if you keep TaxSlayer up, if you look, this is just for federal. If you want to do state, it's like $60 for state. Once you do the federal form, the state form is incredibly easy. It's like an extra couple hours of work. So where do I go to do my my state taxes? I just do the state of Maine IRS and I just fill out the forms. And now everything is all done electronically. So you just enter the numbers in and you just do it here. So for $23, I did my federal and state income taxes. Where if I would have paid somebody to do it, because I have a business, a small business for the apartment, I have 2 kids, so you have all these different things, it'd have been about $1,000. Maine Revenue Services. I type Maine IRS because I never remember, but I just go Maine Revenue Services. And you just do it, it costs, it takes you an hour, but you got to do your federal first because you need your adjusted gross income. And you get that from the federal form. Once you have that, then you do your state. What's that?
And my federal.
Well, you couldn't have done it even that long because federal government wasn't accepting income tax until the 29th of January. Maybe you did them, but you couldn't submit them. But the federal government didn't start accepting 1040 forms until the 29th of January. I had to pay again, so. But so this is, so I'm giving you a hint, but I'm actually telling you, I'm giving you another piece of advice. Again, it may be useless advice. I just said I would have spent $1,000 on taxes, but it cost me $23. That's the other thing to do. Is try to do things yourself. You're all smart people. You're all accomplished. Watch a YouTube video, spend the time, because if you can do some of these things on your own, so you think, okay, I saved about $1,000, but actually to be able to save $1,000, you need to make like double, typically is what you say. So I would have had to make $2,000 of income, right? Because when they pay tax and social security and yada, yada, yada on that, you're left with $1,000. So that would have cost me 2,000 hours or $2,000, which is however many hours of work to go ahead and do that. So if there's things you can do on your own, do it. Mow your lawn, clean your house, shovel your driveway. Change your oil, change your tires. I still change my oil in my cars. I don't change my tires anymore because I don't have the tools.
Can't you just like start using tires and jack up off?
You can, but like if you go to, I think Town Fair Tire or some of those places, they'll do that as part of the cost of the tire. And then they do lifetime tire balance and rotation. So I used to rotate my tires myself, but I just found it to be just a pain. So I just do it all at once. Because you take one set of wheels off and then you got to do a different set of wheels. So you need 2 or 3 jacks to do it. But yeah, I still change my own oil. So that's just one of those things. If you have the ability to do things yourself, highly, highly encourage you to do that. And you learn about things, and then you also don't get taken advantage of. So
Like money out. When you go there, like, well, I just do. I just do my car inspector, all place. They're like, all right, you need this, and this. I'm like, I don't think so. I'm just over here. I not even to another guy. I just took it to a different place. And they were like, oh, no, good to go.
you see, you're very lucky because normally when you try to get an inspection sticker, if it doesn't pass, they'll cut your inspection sticker in half. And then you get pulled over.
Well, there's stuff that need to work. They couldn't put their OBD thing in. They're like, your car's all in. Like, no, it's not. I just had this checked out last week on my own thing. But they tried. Luckily, they gave me 3, so I got some.
Yeah. It's just one of those things. But like I said, this is right now, you can save yourself, $20. So it's maybe not a huge savings. But if you do TurboTax, I would just, because again, most of you make less than 50-something thousand dollars a year. If you go to irs.gov, you can free file. Right here, it even puts it on its first page. Sorry, I was wrong. 79,000. Anybody make more than 79,000? And this is adjusted gross income, which means they also take off some deductions and stuff like that. So like if you have kids or maybe you're in college or something, you can get some of these things. And they just ask you, explore free guided tax software. So you can get this for free instead of paying $50. It's good beer money, right? So this is what I'm saying, like just you're empowering yourself. You're not falling into the whims of what society says. Because if you watch the Super Bowl, there probably was all kinds of tax ones and commercials and all this stuff. Because those companies make a lot of money. This is when they make their money. They got 3 months to make all their profits for the entire year. But if you do this yourself, especially when you do it when it's an easier situation, which is what most of you have, then as you get a more complicated situation, once you start getting more than $79,000, then dependents, kids, you're going to start paying back student loans and you can get some credits for that. You can start doing retirement contributions. Like we said, doing the IRA stuff is a pretty important thing. Getting some of these things underway is really important. And I don't work for this company. I'm not selling anything, but my suggestion would be use this company for your retirement stuff. They're the king of low income funds or low fee funds. So if you look at their fees, they tend to have the lowest fees out of all the companies. So everybody, when you invest, everybody's going to have more or less the same funds. You might have a different person, but for the most part, if you buy what are called index funds, which just basically track the major indices like the S&P 500, you can buy an S&P 500 fund that pretty much matches exactly what the S&P 500 is. So there's no management fees other than just making sure that the numbers are about the same. So the expense ratios are really low, and the expense ratios are what eat into your profits. So if you have 1%, expense fees, then if you make 10%, 1% disappears to pay for the fund expenses. And the other thing you got to be really careful of is a financial advisor. I'm not saying they're all bad. Just be very careful because a lot of them now are fee-based. They charge you 0.75%, 1% a year. And that's if your money goes up or down. So if you have $100,000, they charge you $1,000 a year, whether that is 110,000 at the end of the year or 90,000. Most of you all have pretty simple situations. Just buy index funds. And depending how much risk you have, you can buy index funds like, more aggressive science and technology and all that stuff. But if you just buy index funds, you don't have to worry about it. Unless you're one of these people who the whole day. So some people will just sit there, like NVIDIA. Let's do NVIDIA. Anybody know what NVIDIA is?
Oh, they're shoot.
They make GPUs, graphical processing units. Big graphical processing units.
Yeah.
And they're really big because there's a lot of AI. So I guess the GPUs. I guess it doesn't like NVIDIA. So if you look over here, you can actually go and you can do real-time pricing. So the ticker is NVDA. And someplace over here, you don't want that one. You might want to look at some of these sub ones, but so it's pre-market, so it's not changing, but you can click on this and you can see over the course of a day. So if you're somebody like this, who spends all day staring at this, you should not buy NVIDIA because you can't handle the fluctuations in the market.
But just drop them.
Well, that's the right attitude to have. So let's say you bought 10,000 shares of NVIDIA at $100 a share. And then, so that's $1 million, right? And then it goes down to $50 a share. How much money have you lost? 500,000? Everybody agree with Pat?
Well, not yet. Real.
Pat's correct. I haven't lost anything. You only lose it when you sell it. So what if it goes down? I still have 10,000 shares. I haven't lost a penny until I sell it. So that's the thing. What's that? And you can see real time right here. It's going up and down. You can see that you can do some pre-market stuff, even though technically these are just kind of holds, but you can see it bouncing around. Drew, what were you saying?
Does that change like parameters and stuff like that?
If you're trying to do your net worth calculation, if you're trying to do your net worth calculation and like that was important to you, it would change your net worth because the value of the stock is less. But here's where you got to be careful is you can't put too much stock in your net worth because it's going to fluctuate up and down. Even over the course of a year, if it had a bad stock market and you're heavily in the stock market, it can go down. It's what's the trend over time. As long as you're doing this, you'll be in good shape. If you're not doing that, if you're kind of either flat or going down over time, then you're not saving enough or you're picking bad investments. But you can buy individual stocks. Even you can buy that, you can have what's called a self-directed IRA where you can pick stocks and you can manage it that way. But that's a lot of time and effort. Your brain can only handle so much unless you love doing this stuff. Doing a lot of buying of stocks with retirement stuff is generally a dangerous thing to do. But if you buy NVIDIA and you think it's going to be a growing company for the next 20 years, then you buy it today and you don't sell it for 20 years.
Well, $7
Of NVIDIA? There you go. You're living the dream.
I used to do like 10 months every time I put it.
That's okay. That's how we all start. I started by investing in my retirement. When my first job, I was putting in, whatever my 15% was, and I was making my first job was $43,500 a year. So on a monthly basis, that's like $300 or something like that. But over time, it grows and grows and grows because you all want to retire at some point and you don't want to rely exclusively on Social Security if it even exists when you're old and gray. You want to rely on whatever.
But then, you said, what is the next one again?
Well, you have all kinds of index funds. So when I said Vanguard, again, I don't get any profit. I mean, I personally use Vanguard from our brokerage account, but I'm not going to recommend any tickers or anything like that because I think it's illegal. There's SEC things. I don't know anything about it. I can just tell you if you look at, let's just do personal investors and let's see. See if we can do a search.
Like a bunch of stocks. Want to buy that. But it's small. Yeah.
So you have exactly what Pat said. When you have an index fund, you can buy one share, quote unquote, of the index fund. And it distributes because it has like $1 trillion in this index fund. It manages when it buys shares, it buys it over the right companies to make sure that it maintains about the right percentage. Because like Apple, I think is number one as a percentage. They might have 20% of the S&P 500. So they would buy 20% with let's say you put in $10. So 20% out of $2 will go to buy Apple. And then the next company, next company, next company, next company. And so the concept there is that you're just buying, you're just letting them manage that and buy so that you have the right percentages. So if Apple goes up, 30% in a year, you don't get as much money because you're only getting 20%. But if Apple goes down, you don't lose as much money. So you're just kind of playing the odds. You can always invest in individual stocks, but that can be, you're basing it on a lot of different factors. And again, that takes up a lot of headspace. So make it easy and do something that goes from there. But these are, index funds, total stock market funds, growth. You can just go through and look at all these different ones. So you have an index fund. Those are the easy ones. Actively managed funds are like the science and technology. So if people want to invest in science and technology, because I think that's a growing area, you can go ahead and invest in science and technology stocks. You can invest in renewable energy stocks. You can invest in all these different companies depending on what's going on. Now, you can also invest in stocks that are more in line with your investment goals. Like say you wanted to invest, like you're from Congo, say you wanted to invest in stocks that actually support Congo and Congo businesses. One of the suggestions about that is don't invest in those stocks, but invest in regular stocks, and what profits you feel like you can share actually contribute to the individual businesses that way. Usually that has a little more bang for your buck to do it that way. And you get some charitable benefits. So when they talk about, you know, some of the companies that are, there's a term for it, and I can't remember, but that's like, it's good for the earth type stocks. That's okay, but usually you're better off to just say, I'm going to invest in regular stocks and then buy that other thing. Unless you have a really hard time, like you can do energy stocks, like there's an energy fund. So if you buy, so if you look at Vanguard Energy Fund, right? Oh, so I want to, who's got $50,000? Look at that. 50,000, $100,000. So you need $100,000 to invest in this. So this means you're a player, right? But look at the yield, 3.05% over 30 days. And then look at, so the expense ratio is very, very low. Where's the expense ratio? It only has a 0.1% expense ratio. But then if you look at the performance over a period of time, you can see that they had a pretty good 34%. 5 years more in line with everybody else. 10 years pretty bad. And only 6.8%. If you went to the S&P 500 index, so S&P, this is the growth fund. So let's just do this one. So this has a $300,000. And if you take a look at it, let's do the performance over the course of a year. So you can see that this has about a 1% better rate of return since 2000. So not quite 10%, but you can get the idea. It's 7.6%. So again, this is, I like Vanguard, but you can use, you know, whatever company you want, but this is how you can make investing really kind of a lot more straightforward for you. But these are the things that, especially those who are graduating right off, and some of you, even now, if you make money and you can swing it somehow, go ahead and open up a retirement account, set up an IRA, put in $1,000.
You recommend a Roth?
I would do a Roth, always do a Roth. Two reasons. The first reason, and Ryan talked about it, is you get your money out in the future at no tax. And most of your money that you put in, especially as young as you all are, most of the money you put in is going to be pale in comparison to what the growth has been. I mean, if you pick good stocks, your money doubles every 10 years. 7 years, but we'll do 10 years, just make it easy. So if you keep that money in for 50 years at $100 is not $500. It's 100 to 200, 200 to 400, 400 to 800, 800 to 1,600. It's $3,200. You put in $100, you get $3,200. Do you want to be taxed on $100 or $3,100? I'd rather be taxed on $100. Just how it is. So that's the first reason. The other reason, and this is sneaky and insidious, how do I get you to save more money? I trick you. You're going to put $100 in your retirement account, right? If you put it in a traditional, that $100 only feels like $80 because you're going to pay tax on it right now, right? You put in $100 for free, but that $100 that you put in a Roth is you feel $100 because that's actually coming out. You're not getting any tax break on it, so you're actually saving more money by doing a Roth than by an IRA. So if you put $7,000, which is the max limit, I believe, for anybody under 50, $7,000 max. If you put it in a regular IRA, that might feel like $6,000. But if you put it in a Roth IRA, that feels like $7,000. You just saved an extra $1,000, and you don't even realize it. So it's another way that the government benefits you by saying, here, you can actually put in more money in your retirement and you don't even realize. You're just doing it. So it's sneaky, right? Does that make sense? You would, so if you do it in a traditional, you get it at the end of the year. So you put in the $7,000 and you have to pay it up front. But then at the end of the year, you pay it, you get back credit for the $7,000. So your adjusted gross income is reduced by that $7,000 if it's traditional. If it's Roth, you don't get that break.
Right, but you have to pay tax on it.
If you do a traditional, you have to come up with $7,000. If you do traditional, then you pay taxes because you got to come up with the $7,000. But then at the end of the year or the next year when you get your file your taxes, you're going to get a refund that's increased because you didn't have to pay tax on that $7,000 for that previous year. If you do Roth, you don't get the credit. You don't get that break. You have to pay full tax on it. So you don't get it much of a return.
Tax.
Right. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So it's sneaky. Does it make sense, Barzilli?
Oh, yeah, no, there's a lot of business.
That's why people, yeah, people know what's going on.
The other thing to think about too is if you want to really save on taxes, I hate to say this, it's going to be hard. Move out of Maine.
Well, I mean, if there's no income tax in a certain state, and property taxes, sales tax. So it all.
You can do that, but you can say
No, I'm still paying.
Maine is in the top 10. It's called tax burden. This is 2022. This factors in everything. So let's see. Maine is 12.4%. We're at 12.4%. So we're less than Connecticut. And I can't see Vermont, less than Vermont, but we're higher than New Hampshire, which doesn't have income tax, but has high property taxes. We're a third or a quarter bigger. New York. So we are number 41. That means we are the 9th most taxed state. New York is number 1. They're the highest tax state in the country. I lived in New York for a while and it is number 37. It's less than Maine. But if you look, so here's the other thing too. If you look at some of these southern states, look how low the tax burden is. But here's one of the problems of living in these states. They don't have great resources. If you have kids and you live in Florida, that's retiree heaven. Their public schools are not very good. Massachusetts has really good public schools. Tennessee, terrible public schools. Terrible. So the low tax states tend to be bad. California is the oddball. They have bad states because of Proposition 78 or whatever, but they have very high tax rate. So, you know, maybe you just, that's a factor in terms of how you want to do things in terms of thinking about your career. Maine's a great state, you know, love it, you know what I mean, type stuff, but just that's a factor, especially as you get, you know, closer to retirement. I'm a long way from there too, but that's one of the factors, which is, should I live in Maine? Because our Social Security and stuff gets taxed at the state. Everybody pays federal, so that doesn't matter. That you can't change that. No matter what state you live in, you're going to pay federal income taxes, whatever that is. That's uniform. But if you go to Florida where they don't tax Social Security, and I don't know how much we'll get and all that stuff, but that is a factor. And my in-laws, my father-in-law and his wife, they live in Florida because, well, they want nice weather, but they also want to pay less income taxes. And they're bleeding heart liberals. I hope that's not derogatory, but they are very supportive of government stuff, but they still move to a place that has low income taxes because you just can't make the math work. They move from a place that is 15.9%, almost 16% to a state that is almost half the tax burden. So they keep a lot of money.
Hard to pay that much, but you don't see it with a.
Well, you should, Look at this
Yeah.
building.
You should-
Oh, well, I thought you were talking about here. This building exists because of taxpayers.
No.
Yep. Good roads, although that's a relative term.
Okay, I didn't mean like.
But the idea is that we all get some benefits, right? So there are, you know, if you need help, and we all are getting it, you're getting student loans. That is a factor that in other countries, and Brazil and I talked about this, in other countries, you don't have opportunities. Like if you grew up in India, unless you're an absolute genius, your lot in life is set based on the lot of life your family is born in. Is that fair or not? I don't know. But United States truly is the land of opportunity, because no matter who you were born to, what your skin color is, your language, you really can overcome pretty much anything, especially today. I'm not talking about systemic racism that happened many years ago. I'm talking about today, and you really can, improve your lot in life. This truly is one of the few countries that you can do that. So you just have to work. I got way sidetracked. I'm sorry. Did I waste everybody's time? That wasn't my intention.
Is there a way to download videos or podcasts?
Me too. Like right after graduation, it's like, all right.
I'll keep it. I'll keep it on YouTube, but so that's a good point. But the thing is, do not forget, you can do stuff today. You can do stuff now. And there's something called FIRE, financial independence, retire early. You all are in your 20s-ish. So those people want to retire at 40. Not that they don't want to work, it's just that they want freedom and flexibility. You got to start early, and you got to start working hard, and you got to go from there. But these are some of the decisions that can really help you move things forward. So even if you want to work until you're 65 or 75 or 85, it doesn't prevent you. You can just give yourself that flexibility.
Your life though, like, you mean my dad's about to retire at like 50, and I was like, was it worth it to put in those 1,800-hour weeks for all that, and retire 15 years early? It's like,
Well, so can I comment on that? So do you mind if I use your name, what you just said?
Yeah.
I'll just put one of your classmates said his dad is retiring at 50 in a little bit, and he worked 80 or 100 hours a week. I would challenge that as like, you do have to work 80 to 100 hours a week for a period of time. At some point, your money should be working harder than you. And I'm not saying your dad made mistakes or any of that stuff. I'm just saying, like, perhaps if he had invested, perhaps if he had done some of these passive income things where he has to work those 80 or 100 hours weeks, once he's got a good baseline and you've got enough resources to work for you, then you don't have to put in 80 to 100 hours a week. You actually have all these other resources putting in loads and loads of time. So once you get $1 million, let's say you get $1 million in a brokerage account, you're getting 7%, that's $70,000 a year that you don't have to work for. So then you can work a normal job and still make what the average American household makes without having to, get out of your bed. I would say, so my wife and I's plan, and this is not a big surprise, but we need $5 million to retire. We're not anywhere near that. Don't worry. But the rule of thumb is you can take 4% out and you won't outlive your money. So $5 million is $200,000 a year. That's pre-tax, because some of our retirement stuff is not Roth, because you can't do everything in Roth. Some of it is traditional. But take the 4% rule. So if you think you need $100,000 a year, you got to multiply that by 25. You need 2.5. And you know what the average person with a bachelor degree makes over the course of their lifetime? They make $3.5 million. That's what you make. You don't save that. So how are you going to get to 2.5 million when you only make 3.5 million? You got to live, you got to pay for stuff, you got to pay taxes. You got to invest. Let your money work for you. The only way to do it. And again, time is your friend. If you learn that in engineering economics, time is the most powerful proponent. You can take a very small amount of money, and then that translates into a lot if you have enough time. If I had nothing and I wanted to have today, and I wanted to have $5 million, and let's say, I retire at 67, which is full retirement age, then I've got 14 years. I'd have to put in probably $1 million to do that. So I'd be putting in almost $1 million, $100,000 a year to save, which is impossible for me. Whereas if I started at 22, 23, then I'd have 40 years to do it. And I only have to put in maybe a couple $100,000. So if you can put money in at an earlier age, and that's why I said that's what we do with our kids. We've given them a little bit of money because we can't, we're not, uber rich, but we've given them money. So hopefully they'll see that money will grow over time. So hopefully if they need it to buy a house or whatever, they'll have, I don't know, $50,000, whatever it works out to be. I mean, they're nowhere near that. It's just we've given them like $1,000 from grandparents and stuff like that.
Like you can calculate all that, like what you would hire.
Can do it in MATLAB. Find a future value given a present value. Those are built in. Even calculators have it, like the TI-89s. You don't even need to do it online. You can do it in calculator link. So I guess the advice for today is we can do a lot of controls. I'll put the homework up, put the video up, and we'll go from there. Sorry I talked so long. Have a great day, everyone. Hope I didn't bore anybody.
This is the.
Thank you, Paul. Good information.
All right, thanks, Giannis. Have a great day.